There are injuries inside you that do not announce themselves as wounds. They do not always feel like pain. Often they feel like urgency. Like the sudden need to explain yourself when no explanation is required. Like the tightening in your chest when someone becomes colder than usual. Like the strange collapse of confidence after one dismissive look, one delayed message, one subtle change in tone. You call it sensitivity. You call it intuition. You call it overthinking, stress, bad timing, human complexity. But beneath all those names, another reality may be operating. Something quieter. Something older. Something inside you that still responds as if the past were happening now. And when that happens, people gain power over you without needing to force anything at all. Most control is not dramatic. It does not begin with shouting, domination, or obvious cruelty. More often, it begins where your inner structure is still fractured. A person withdraws affection and your mind starts chasing. A person criticizes you and your entire inner atmosphere changes. A person becomes distant and you start bargaining with your dignity just to restore warmth. A room shifts in energy and suddenly you are shrinking, editing yourself, trying to become safer, softer, more acceptable. In those moments, you are not simply reacting to the present. You are reacting to a hidden injury that has been touched in exactly the right place. That is why this matters. Because if an unhealed part of you can be activated on command, then your peace can be disturbed on command as well. Carl Jung understood that what remains unconscious does not remain powerless. It moves beneath the surface. It enters your relationships disguised as attraction, loyalty, patience, forgiveness, devotion, restraint, humility. It shapes who intimidates you, who fascinates you, who destabilizes you, who makes you feel small, who makes you feel desperate to be chosen. The Stoics understood something that completes this insight. Real freedom is not granted by circumstances, but by mastery over your inner life. When you put these two truths together, a difficult but liberating conclusion emerges. The parts of you that remain injured become the points through which the world enters and governs you. Heal those parts and the access begins to close. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about building armor so thick that nothing reaches you. Armor can look like strength while hiding fragility underneath. Real inner mastery is different. It is quieter, steadier, less theatrical. It is the ability to stay with yourself when pressure arrives. To feel an old wound activate without instantly obeying it. To notice the surge of fear, shame, need, or panic, and still remain present enough to choose from truth instead of reflex. That is what makes you harder to manipulate. Not indifference. Not domination. Not emotional numbness. Clarity. Stability. The ending of automatic surrender. The first hidden injury is the injury of abandonment. This one is especially powerful because it attaches itself directly to safety. If some part of you learned that closeness can disappear without warning, that affection can grow cold unexpectedly, that emotional presence is unstable, then your system becomes vigilant. It listens too hard. It scans too quickly. It notices tiny changes and treats them like danger. A slower reply can disturb your entire day. A slight withdrawal in someone's tone can pull your center outward. Space stops feeling neutral. Silence stops feeling temporary. Everything begins to carry the weight of possible loss. This injury gives people power over you because distance becomes a lever. They do not need to threaten. They do not need to argue. They only need to become inconsistent. A little warmth followed by coolness. A little closeness followed by vagueness. A little affection followed by silence. And suddenly your attention is no longer your own. You begin chasing reassurance, offering more than you should, explaining what did not need explanation, tolerating confusion because confusion feels less terrifying than separation. The tragedy of abandonment is not only that it makes you fear losing others. It makes you willing to lose yourself in order to keep them near. Healing abandonment begins when you stop asking how to make people stay and start asking why their movement shakes your foundation so quickly. That question is not small. It changes the entire direction of your life. Because once you understand that the panic belongs partly to an older wound, the present moment stops having absolute authority over you. You begin learning how to remain rooted even when someone becomes unclear. You stop treating uncertainty like an emergency. You stop outsourcing your inner safety to someone else's nearness. And when that happens, people lose one of the easiest ways of controlling your behavior. The second hidden injury is the injury of rejection. This is the wound that makes you over-adapt. It teaches you to read rooms too carefully, to soften your truth before it is fully spoken, to shape yourself around what seems acceptable. It rarely appears as obvious insecurity. More often, it appears as social intelligence, diplomacy, emotional caution, self-awareness. But beneath all of that, there is a frightened calculation taking place. How should you speak so that you are not dismissed? How much of yourself can you show without becoming too much? How much of your real opinion can survive the room? And because this calculation runs constantly, your mind becomes exhausted. Rejection makes you easy to control because the fear of disapproval becomes a leash. You do not need chains if the possibility of not being liked already weakens your spine. You become more manageable in groups, more compliant in relationships, more hesitant around authority, more willing to betray your own clarity in exchange for temporary acceptance. You stop choosing what is true and start choosing what is safest. Over time, you may still look functional, respected, even socially successful. But inside, something essential begins to disappear. You are no longer living from conviction. You are living from avoidance. Healing rejection means learning that being unchosen does not equal being without value. It means surviving friction without interpreting it as annihilation. It means allowing the room to be uncomfortable without immediately editing yourself into something smaller. Once rejection stops meaning personal collapse, your mind becomes much harder to govern through social pressure. Disapproval may still sting, but it no longer reorganizes your identity. You can remain standing in your own truth even when others do not mirror it back to you. That is one of the clearest signs that inner mastery is beginning. The third hidden injury is shame. Shame is not merely pain over what happened. It is pain fused with concealment. It teaches you that certain parts of you are not safe to reveal. Your anger, your grief, your desire, your fear, your sensitivity, your need, your mistakes, your longing, your confusion. These parts are quietly pushed underground so that the world sees a cleaner, more acceptable version of you. The cost of this is severe. You split yourself. You become skilled at presenting what can be approved while hiding what feels dangerous to expose. Shame gives others power because whatever you are ashamed of becomes accessible through implication. If you are ashamed of your need, someone can keep you trapped by offering just enough not to lose you. If you are ashamed of your sensitivity, one mocking look can rearrange your behavior. If you are ashamed of your anger, others can cross your boundaries repeatedly while you call your silence maturity. If you are ashamed of your mistakes, someone with moral superiority can dominate your mind for days. Shame creates hidden wires everywhere. Touch one and you react before you have time to think. Healing shame does not mean glorifying every emotion or every impulse. It means refusing to exile your humanity. It means learning how to look at what is real in you without immediate self-contempt. The more integrated you become, the less leverage shame provides. Once you stop treating parts of yourself like forbidden territory, other people lose the ability to control you through the fear of exposure. You become quieter inside, less fragmented, less eager to hide, less vulnerable to humiliation. And that quietness is strength. The fourth hidden injury is unworthiness. This one is especially deceptive because it often disguises itself as ambition. You work harder, improve more, achieve more, learn more, fix more, and present more, all while quietly believing that who you are is not enough unless it is enhanced, proven, polished, or useful. In that state, your life becomes performance. You are not simply trying to grow. You are trying to deserve existence through excellence. That is a brutal way to live because it makes every interaction feel like a test and every outcome feel like a verdict. Unworthiness gives others power because approval becomes a drug and criticism becomes a weapon. A person who senses that your self-respect still depends on outside validation can guide your behavior with very little effort. Praise lifts you higher than it should. Indifference empties you faster than it should. Correction wounds deeper than it should. You are no longer in dialogue with the world. You are standing before it like a defendant waiting for judgment. And as long as your worth remains unstable inside you, the outside world will keep finding ways to move you. Healing unworthiness begins when you separate value from performance. When you understand that you can still improve without needing improvement to justify your existence. That you can fail without becoming failure. That you can be imperfect without becoming inferior. Once your worth is no longer hanging in the balance in every conversation, your reactions change. Criticism may still matter, but it no longer destroys proportion. Praise may still feel good, but it no longer governs identity. You become less dramatic internally, less easy to flatter, less easy to crush. This is a profound form of freedom. The fifth hidden injury is betrayal. This is the wound left behind when openness was used against you, when honesty met deception, when trust was broken in ways that altered your perception of intimacy itself. Betrayal rarely leaves you simply cautious. It leaves you divided. One part of you longs for closeness, certainty, sincerity. Another part expects hidden motives, reversal, and emotional danger. This split changes how you read people. You may distrust what is calm because chaos feels more familiar. You may confuse inconsistency with depth because unpredictability resembles the emotional environment where the wound was formed. Betrayal gives others power because it distorts discernment. You begin reacting not only to what is happening, but to what your wound is prepared to imagine. Small ambiguities feel loaded. Mixed signals feel magnetic. Someone who should be obviously misaligned can occupy too much of your mind because your system is trying to solve an old fracture through a new face. On the other side, someone genuinely steady may feel less compelling precisely because steadiness does not activate the old emotional architecture. That is the cruelty of betrayal. It can make what harms you feel familiar and what heals you feel strange. Healing betrayal means rebuilding trust first in your own perception. It means noticing what your body already knows before your mind rationalizes it away. It means learning how to respect discomfort without immediately converting it into fantasy, excuse, or hope. The more you trust yourself, the less power others gain through ambiguity. You stop reacting to confusion as if it were mystery. You stop treating inconsistency like passion. You stop surrendering so quickly to the emotional gravity of what feels unfinished. And that is when your mind starts becoming your ally again. The sixth hidden injury is helplessness. This wound forms when repeated experiences teach you that your voice changes nothing, that your boundaries will not matter, that your protest will not be respected, that your needs are inconvenient, that your truth does not alter the outcome. Over time, the psyche adapts by becoming smaller in advance. You stop asking. You stop resisting. You stop trusting your own agency. You call it patience. You call it maturity. You call it avoiding drama. But often what is happening is older than wisdom. It is resignation wearing noble language. Helplessness gives others power because you surrender before the moment has even fully tested you. A stronger personality enters and you shrink. A difficult conversation approaches and you soften prematurely. An unfair dynamic emerges and you assume resistance is pointless. This makes you extraordinarily easy to govern through pressure because the real obedience is already happening inside you. The outside person only completes what the wound has begun. Healing helplessness starts in small acts of authorship. One clear no, one preference spoken without apology, one boundary held through discomfort, one delay before automatic compliance. These moments teach your system something revolutionary, that your agency is still alive. The seventh hidden injury is emotional deprivation. This wound forms when your deeper emotional needs were undernourished for so long that scarcity began to feel normal. You learned to survive on fragments. A little attention, a little warmth, a little tenderness, a little consistency. Because there was so little, your system adapted by overvaluing scraps. Then one of the most dangerous distortions begins. Minimal care starts feeling extraordinary. Inconsistent affection starts feeling meaningful. Partial presence starts feeling precious. Hunger changes your perception of value. Emotional deprivation gives others power because anyone who offers small relief to your starvation can keep your attention far longer than truth would justify. You remain in situations that drain you because occasional warmth feels too significant to release. You call crumbs hope. You call confusion depth. You call bare minimum effort special because some older part of you is still starving enough to mistake survival for love. That is why this wound is so painful. It does not only keep you deprived, it keeps you attached to deprivation. Healing emotional deprivation requires grief, deep, honest grief for how little once felt normal. Grief for the years in which too little was called enough. Grief for the standards lowered just to remain connected to something. But grief restores proportion. It teaches you what nourishment actually looks like. Steadiness, reciprocity, calm, emotional presence that does not need to be chased or decoded. Once you recognize real nourishment, bait loses its magic. And when bait loses its magic, people lose one of their easiest routes into your mind. The eighth hidden injury is humiliation. Humiliation is not only pain. It is pain mixed with collapse. It is the wound of being made to feel small, exposed, diminished, or lowered in a way that leaves a deep imprint on your nervous system. Because of that, even small signs of disrespect can trigger reactions that feel larger than the moment itself. A condescending tone, a dismissive gesture, a subtle public slight, a look that carries superiority, these things can enter you too deeply and too quickly if the old wound is still alive underneath. Humiliation gives others power because status pressure becomes enough to hijack your mind. You may over-explain, over-perform, rage, freeze, obsess, replay, fantasize about undoing the moment, all because some deeper part of you is not only responding to the present insult but to an older collapse. Healing humiliation means rebuilding dignity from the inside rather than demanding that life never bruise it again. It means learning that another person's attempt to lower you does not define your real stature. Once dignity becomes less dependent on immediate victory or public image, disrespect loses much of its power to own your mind. When you step back and look at these injuries together, abandonment, rejection, shame, unworthiness, betrayal, helplessness, emotional deprivation, humiliation, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Each one creates an access point. Each one shortens the distance between stimulus and reaction. Each one makes certain people, tones, silences, expressions, and absences far more influential than they should be. In other words, each one gives the outside world a route into your inner life. Heal the route and the world's power changes shape. This is where inner mastery becomes practical rather than decorative. It is not the ability to speak eloquently about trauma while continuing to be ruled by it. It is not the performance of calm while your nervous system remains governable. Real mastery is slower, more honest, less glamorous. It is the repeated practice of noticing where your peace disappears too quickly, where your dignity becomes negotiable, where your hunger rewrites reality, where shame silences you, where fear speeds you up, where old pain enters the room disguised as present truth. That noticing is not weakness. It is the beginning of sovereignty. In those moments, the most important skill is pause. Someone withdraws. Someone criticizes. Someone delays. Someone disapproves. Someone disrespects. Someone offers crumbs. Instead of moving instantly, you ask, what exactly has been touched in me? Is this moment as large as it feels, or has it collided with something older? That question interrupts possession. It creates space. And in that space, your mind has a chance to return before the wound takes over completely. This is how reactions begin turning into responses. Not through suppression but through awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. That idea becomes real only when it meets a live wound. Otherwise it remains elegant language. But when abandonment is triggered, when shame rises, when hunger distorts perception, when humiliation burns, then the challenge becomes concrete. Can you remain with yourself long enough not to hand the steering wheel over to pain? Can you let the sensation move through you without allowing it to write the meaning of the moment? This is not easy, but it is the path. The more you do this work, the more people begin losing their old access. The person who once destabilized you through silence finds you calmer. The person who once controlled you through approval finds you less eager to perform. The person who relied on your shame finds you harder to diminish. The person who fed you crumbs finds you less willing to starve beautifully. They may not understand what changed, but you will. You healed the injury they were reaching through. You reclaimed the territory that old pain had left exposed. Inner mastery is not the absence of feeling. You will still feel disappointment, grief, anger, attraction, fear, tenderness, hope. But those states will no longer govern you so completely from hidden fractures. You will feel more without being ruled more. You will remain open without becoming easy to manipulate. You will stay human without becoming programmable. That is a deeper power than emotional detachment could ever provide. It is not cold. It is coherent. So if you want people to lose their power over you, do not begin with them. Begin with the injuries. Begin with the places inside you where your reactions outrun your wisdom. Begin where silence feels dangerous, where criticism feels annihilating, where crumbs feel meaningful, where disapproval feels like erasure, where shame still divides you from yourself. These are not places to hate. They are places to understand, grieve, and heal. Because whatever remains injured in you will keep negotiating with your freedom until it is finally met. Your power is not missing. It is often trapped behind old pain, buried under old lessons, entangled with old fears that were never fully examined. Heal those hidden injuries and something extraordinary begins to happen. The hooks loosen. The urgency fades. The room loses some of its control. The silence loses some of its terror. The praise loses some of its intoxication. The rejection loses some of its violence. And in the quiet after all of that, something solid remains. Not performance. Not armor. Not illusion. Just you, more present, more rooted, more difficult to move away from yourself. That is inner mastery. If this message reached something deep in you, comment now. I reclaim my inner power.